hearing your voice.
My accent.
No.
So
Anybody hearing their own voice back to them, it's, I don't sound like that, do you?
yeah. So for anybody who's watching this, I mean, I think that one of the best exercises you possibly can do is try to do, you don't need to necessarily create a video and put it online, but when I started teaching RTS with Tom, he made us take one of the parts of the course, film ourselves, and then watch back. And nothing is more like creepy feeling than when you see your mannerisms and the things that you do. Like even me doing the study groups are a little bit, I'm not as refined as when I'm actually filming a video, and I'm seeing some of the mannerisms I have when I do these things. I'm like, oh my gosh, I do that. I'm grabbing here, I'm standing like this. It's really an eye-opening experience, but also it's really, really revealing if you do on-camera stuff or anything like that. Yeah, I think it's really great. Working on improvising, coming up with something and saying, hey everyone, this is Brandon from Strata. Today I want you to think about exercise and not getting hurt, but we're gonna talk today about Bauer masks. They are super great. Bauer, of all masks, help to let a little bit of air in and not let any germs out. And that's great to help you stay safe from COVID. Anyway, I want you to stay safe, talk to you soon. You know, like just trying to be able to like button something together, whatever it may be. It's fun exercise. Okay, we are gonna continue down resistance profile conversation land. What I saw, I'm gonna show you guys a video of something that I saw yesterday. There's a guy on YouTube. Let's see if I can share the screen. It's gonna let me work. So I apologize if this doesn't work out as seamlessly as I want to. There's a guy on YouTube named Garage Gym Reviews, and I like Garage Gym Reviews for exercise equipment reviews because I'm a big exercise equipment nerd. I like to know what's out there and what's new. And Rogue
machine is brutal.
Rogue, that's what we're gonna talk about it. Rogue, I actually think Rogue, as far as free weight equipment goes, makes some really, really brilliant stuff. Rogue has recently teamed up with Westside Barbell. If you're not familiar with Westside Barbell, you have Louis, what's that? Westside Barbell. Louis Simmons is this old school dude from Columbus, Ohio. He is still running Westside Barbell. If you want to learn more about the providence of powerlifting and Westside Barbell, if you haven't seen it already, which I'm sure everyone here has, but if you haven't.
I was supposed to go there for a seminar with, what's his, Mark Smelly Bells.
Oh, yeah, Mark Bell.
Yeah.
Right, that would be awesome.
It was like supposed to be happening during after Arnold's this year. I was supposed to go there.
I'm jealous. I really want to go down there. And when this is all settled, if you ever go down,
I worked for, they were paying for the entire thing.
Oh, it's still in the future. If you ever go see Greg Mack's place in Columbus, I mean, Louis Simmons' stuff is not that far off. So I was actually going to go by there next time. I'm terrified of getting pulled in for a workout because I know they try to break pretty much everybody that walks in there, so to speak. But Louis Simmons, old school body or power lifter, like really, really at the beginning of the sport, he has created helped grow and coach some of the most amazing powerlifting athletes. I mean, he's crazy. If you want to see, I think it's West Side World is the Netflix documentary where he introduces more of his background. You learn a lot more about his history, coaching style, the good and the bad. And I don't even mean exercise-wise, but just the way that he kind of works with people and how he mentally coaches them and challenges people. He's crazy though. I mean, he absolutely had a meniscus surgery and then power lifted 1 rep max squat the next day. Like that kind of illogical, but really go-getter, right? Like it's just wild. Anyway, he destroyed his back. I actually don't remember the actual orthopedic injury he had. I think he might've had a surgery. In any event, he's come up with some really great stuff, taking like Russian, some of the old school Russian Olympic research on periodization and undulating periodization, mixing it with his powerlifting stuff that he learned here and a bunch of other research, putting it together to come up with some really brilliant ways to help people get stronger. One of the machines he invented, if you're unfamiliar with it, is the reverse hyper, which is extremely popular right now at a lot of CrossFit gyms. You can find one of these things. And frankly, if we had the room, I would buy one, but I want to talk about why I would buy it and what we would do different.
So you can actually set it, but it might be a little bit different, but you can get like one of those boxes and set it up with a cable machine.
I think we should definitely do that on the floor one day and experiment because I would love to try that.
This one, the high box though.
Well, this is what got me excited about this is I saw this and I looked into it actually for here because it's a fold up reverse hyper. So it's like $400 Canadian or maybe $450. You squish it together, it goes against the wall, and then you can pull it out.
That's awesome.
So I'm
from Rogue.
From Rogue,
Wow.
yeah. So we're not going to talk about the mechanics of the machine. I would say if you want to check it out, The video, it's his current video, Rogue, West Side Scout, Hyper Review. I just think it's a cool machine. What I did want to talk about is how people use it. Because one of the challenges with this is when we were talking about the last few weeks with the resistance profiles, I was saying, hey, we're strictly going to be talking about statics. Because when you add motion, everything gets more complicated. When you have potential for energy and you're just sitting still, totally different when there's motion-based variables. So I want you guys just to watch this, like, I think it's 5 to 8 seconds, and watch how he gets it started and then how he gets into it. And I'm actually going to turn the volume on because I want you guys to note something else, not what he says.
Put in, and then I'm able to go. So just to show you kind of how it rocks, I'll do a few rips. As you can see,
Lower back. Looks at that.
So first and foremost, if you guys have done a hard exercise where you're focused and you're squeezing your muscles, can you talk really well?
No.
Okay. So right off the bat, if we review this, you guys can see he gets in and he does skip in the video.
and then I'm able to go. So just to show you kind of how it rocks, I'll do a few rips. As you can see.
Now, I don't want to pick on what he's saying or anything like that. I think the machine is really brilliant. But you guys can already see, without any mechanical analysis, what does he start off by doing? And then we're going to add a little bit of philosophy to it today, and then we're going to get into the mechanics and talk about the mechanics of it. He gets in.
Uses the momentum.
Yeah. You guys are nailing it. Uses the momentum, gets it going.
So just to show you kind of how it rocks.
And then he's going.
I'll do a few rips.
Yeah, they're bumper plates. They're bumper plates. You can only put on 90 pounds on each side because it's got a really small peg. So anyway, as you guys can see, it's a pretty cool machine. I like the idea that it can fold up. It's a very popular exercise. I actually think the machine, the mechanics of it, has some really brilliant opportunity. I think it's great. I think that someone watching this and trying to replicate what he's doing here is a bit tough. And 99% of people I see who use this machine go about doing it just like this. And it's even to the point that when he does it,
the front legs are coming up.
That in itself should already start to show how much momentum and kinetic energy this thing has, and based off of the direction that it's going and how it's swinging, which we're going to talk about here a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to screen share a different screen, and then we're going to add a little bit more info. So I'm just going to have a static picture up here so we can talk about this. Now, all I did was I went to Rogue and I got the first picture that I could find. I think I've got a second one that I won't be able to show very well, but it's just somebody else doing it on a different model, and you can see the starting position, so to speak. So we're going to start with this one. Now, adding a tiny bit of philosophy to this, this is one of the reasons why I talk so much about thinking about exercise mechanics right now. And, you know, I definitely get caught sometimes in accidentally sounding and coming across bias, and I really got to make sure that I don't. What I want to make sure is that when we're talking about the stuff that we're talking about with resistance profiles, that all of this information that we're talking about over the last couple weeks, just mechanics related. We're not getting into anatomy yet, muscle profiles. We're going to get into that because when we add muscle-based profiles, thinking of strength profiles, things get very different when we're looking at this profile, this scenario. But if we just talk about the mechanics of the machine, we can start looking at how's the resistance profile set up if there was no motion-based variables, and then how does it change when Cooper, the guy from the channel, is actually getting some momentum and using momentum in that exercise. The whole reason why Louis created this thing was to help his lower back. He had a lower back surgery. He wanted to get a lower back stronger. In this video, he even recommends that if you can barbell back squat 500 pounds, his recommended weight is that you do 250. I would argue that even the strongest person at that gym probably couldn't do half their back squat with strict control, but they probably could do it like this with the swings. And so if you guys ever hear me talk about kettlebell swings or other momentum-based resistance exercises, it's one of the reasons why from a resistance exercise perspective, I have a hard time getting my head around it. As an anaerobic exercise, I think it's great, but I always wonder what's the bridge in between? How could you figure out, well, what's happening in the kettlebell swing or this exercise that's working? And could we be more strategic and more efficient? So what I've done, we're going to come back here and we'll start right here on this little chart. I'm going to try this annotation feature again a little bit. So again, if you guys are familiar with strength profiles, human profiles, anatomy and stuff like that, just for today, I'm not going to be talking about that too much. What I do want to talk about from a a philosophical perspective is a good friend of mine, Dave Friday, that some of you know, who's taken all the same core stuff. He has an awesome home basement gym and basically does the muscle system specialist stuff from his basement, I think exclusively right now. And I saw him on the weekend, and we were just talking about philosophy in exercise, resistance exercise land, because you guys heard me, there are so many different camps of thought. And if you heard me say some of my videos where I talk about exercise, I truly believe that there is, when people say Pilates, yoga, powerlifting, yoga Lattes, spin, whatever you want to call these things, none of these brands of exercise from an exercise perspective really exist. They are quite literally packaged groupings of style of exercise on specific devices with specific time elements. Sometimes there's brands of clothing and colors associated with it, but generally from resistance exercise perspective, it comes back to the simple variables that we talked about, the personalized exercise mixing board. How much resistance is there? How much time is there? And what a great opportunity about that is that if we can see exercise in that lens, Pilates, yoga, whichever thing it is that you'd like to do, if you have a client that comes in and they want to get stronger, but they're really familiar with yoga, instead of just jumping to a free weight exercise, we can go, great. Let's take some of the things you're already doing and start blending it with a little more resistance and a little less time. And it gives us a lot of freedom within exercise customization, which is one of the reasons why I like that perspective, that it's just physics and biology. So Dave said something on the weekend that I had not heard these words in a long time. He was talking about the reticular activation system, and that as human, like forgetting exercise land, as humans, when we're taking in information, I'm sitting here with you guys right now. I am subconsciously taking in environmental information, color information, light information, all these different things that are happening right now. My ears are sort of listening for someone banging on the window. You guys are in front of me, but I also have biases and ways that I view things that are kind of limiting how I'm seeing things a little bit. And then sometimes I've got things I'm not thinking about that I'm not even aware of, that it's not even registering. From the reticular activation system perspective, what I'm hoping that this conversation does is that if I can get you guys to see some things, not necessarily my way, but just in a different way, that when you're looking at exercises and clients, that it just gives you more freedom. And that way you can add a new piece of information. You go, wait a second, when this thing is traveling down, it's actually not traveling down, it's actually traveling forward, or whatever it may be. But I find that really, really interesting. So if you guys want to learn more about that, the reticular activation system, I think is really cool. I was reading a bit on the weekend and very interesting. Lastly, you guys have no real issue with this, but I want to try and look at these exercises as objectively as I can. So rather than subjective and bias. So what I want is, if we're going through this and it sounds like I'm leaning in one direction too hard, let me know. Let me know, because I want to try and talk about these things and see what do we see with the information of how people are currently doing it, and what can we do to make it sharper. So this exercise, we'll start with this particular model to get the ball rolling. So we talked about a couple things, right? We talked about, for analyzing resistance or resistance profile, we're going to look at a couple different positions, perhaps the start position and end position, and sometimes we're going to have to add the end position. Actually, you know what? In fact, I'm going to switch to the other chart because I want to have both pictures. So we're going to go to the screen here. Is it going to let me?
Nope.
Pardon me for 1 second. There we go.
That's the one. They have two actually of them.
Where's that?
That's pure.
Oh, cool. It's got 2 different loading places for the resistance too.
Yeah,
Nice.
so, and you can do like single legs as well.
Oh,
Let me see.
There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's really weird
Pardon
how,
me.
It's like flat in this machine, but then
Yeah.
that one's like curved.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So,
plus the handles are much lower on that one.
okay. So just for today,
That one's weird.
yeah, I believe this is an older model. So just for today, is this gonna let me do straight lines? Oh, amazing. Sorry, life just got really happy. Okay, straight lines, awesome. Cool, so to get started, what I want you guys to just see right off the bat is that if we're trying to analyze resistance profiles, I guess we don't need my face up here, resistance profiles, I think we should start off with, where's the lever system that we're looking at? Where's the resistance traveling in a static position, even though this individual clearly is in the middle of a dynamics, well, I believe is not performing any isometrics. We're gonna say that these are static isometric positions just to start with where we're at right now. So Now, we talked about levers as far as adding some complicating variables last week. I'm going to just use the bar as the lever system right now to make life really easy for starting to see this. So if we were going to start with this drawing, right down here, we have free weights. This free weight is not attached to any cables or really anything that modifies which direction it's going to travel. Does that sound fair? If that free weight was going to travel any direction, if it were not attached to a peg, which way is it going to go down? Straight down, right? Heavily influenced by gravity. So if this was a static position, there were no changes, this thing is going to try to travel down to the ground. Oh, this is great. Okay. If we say, right, the small things make me very happy. Okay. If we come over to this position, same thing, right? Dynamic, we're not talking about dynamic, we're talking about this being an isometric position. If this free weight were not attached to a peg, an axis of any sort, which way is it going to travel? Straight down to the ground. Same thing. Specifically in this isometric orientation. Now, I do recognize that this is kind of you can tell it's kind of a slightly oblique view. So my drawings are not going to be 100% accurate, but for the sake of this, I think it'll be okay to start. Now, what I am going to try and do is we got to talk about where the joint axis is. Look at this, colors, okay? So if we're going to add a joint axis to even try and find the moment arm, I think we should be talking about the machine. And so this big bar right here is called an input arm. And right now, can't really see it, but you guys could probably tell there's probably a joint axis somewhere up here, right? We got the big line, it goes up, probably connects here, maybe a little higher. Actually, this looks like it's a little lower. It looks like it's actually right in line with this dot. So I'm going to do that just to make it, okay, that's not 100% perfect, but we'll start with that. So we've got a joint axis of where this input arm is. We have this free weight in which direction it's going. Now, the nice thing when we're talking about free weight based exercises is we get a really strong idea of which way they want to go if there's no momentum, because they want to go just straight down to the ground. And all the mechanisms and pieces in between are what really modify the direction and, frankly, the vantage point, if there is one, for this based off of the joint axis and the fulcrum. Now, for this one, if we were going to draw a moment arm like we talked about last week, we need three things, which you guys were nailing last week. We need
A line of force.
Beautiful, Liz. What else do we need?
The joint axis.
Cool. And then what is that thing that we need to the other thing?
Perpendicular relationship.
Yes, but from what to what?
Well, from the line of force to the joint axis.
Why not the joint axis to the line of force?
Because the joint axis is a simple dot, and you cannot, and then you can't find a 90-degree angle from a dot.
Nailed it. Cool. All right. So right here, this one's super easy, right? We got this line of force going down to the ground, and we have this moment arm, which is a 90-degree angle right here to the line of force to that joint axis. So we got this distance here, but this distance at this point really doesn't mean anything if we're not comparing it to anything in this point. Now, when we start talking about strength profiles and muscularity and how muscles can contract in specific positions and orientation, that'll become more prudent with this individual. But we're going to review this same photo when we add the strength profile stuff in. Over here, we've got a kind of an interesting scenario. We got that joint axis here, and we got the line of force here. Now, if I were to try and draw a line of force, sorry, a moment arm from this, you guys can see that the 90-degree angle here, there's no joint axis anywhere across here that I can connect to. So we talked about last week how that if we're going to try and find out what the moment arm is, that what we can absolutely do is we can extend the line of force up to technically infinity. So I'm just going to draw it all the way up. It really just needs to be as high as that joint axis, but we're going to go all the way up to make life pretty easy. And same thing, like you guys, Liz and Darian, you were both saying, that if we're going to try and find that moment arm, we need to find that perpendicular relationship from the line of force to the joint axis. We got, boom, right there. So two things right off the bat. We're not going to talk about momentum yet. We've got this line here and this line here, right? Side A, I don't have my pencil up, right? We'll call it picture left, picture right. Which one has a larger moment arm? The right one has a larger moment arm. So if we're talking about larger moment arm and that resistance is further away from the joint axis, even if we have the exact same weight from one to the other, this one will be heavier because using the teeter-totter references we talked about last week, this person, 10-pound individual, is further away from the center of the teeter-totter than this one is.
Quick question. Okay, so you just said the term weight. Now, there was this article that I was reading, and I'm curious how you think about it. So, let's say that plate is 5 pounds, right? So then the load on the machine is always 5 pounds, but it's the resistance that's different. So even though it's 5 pounds down here, the load 5 pounds up here, the load, but the resistance down here is 5 pounds. The resistance up here maybe 10 pounds, based on the longer moment arm.
Correct. So weight.
Is that the terminology that we use? Or?
I wouldn't use load because load is a little bit different when you're talking about engineering terms.
Yeah.
But I will say weight, right? The weight is the same. But when we start talking about weight, we have other variables too, because then when we talk about Kaiser machines, we have PSI.
Is it weight and mass?
Well, weight is mass times acceleration. So, pardon me? No, force is mass times acceleration as well. I'm going to find out the equation for that. What is the equation for weight?
Weight is the versus mass. Mass is the density of an object.
Yes.
How many atoms in a certain amount of space in the type of atoms. Weight
It's
is
just
the
I'm
magnitude.
struggling with English terms because
Yeah.
Weight is magnitude, isn't it?
Yeah.
Terms of-
I'll tell you what, I'm going to clear this up because I don't know the exact words right now. I want to make sure I'm really clear with this for sure.
And in terms
I
of-
would be, sorry, what were you saying, Taylor?
In terms of the axis right now, you have it set up for the magnitude profile.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So joint axis of the machine.
Just the machine.
Okay, just making sure.
Just the machine. Yeah. And then that's what I was saying. We're not adding the body part in
Oh.
just
okay.
yet. This is just talking about the
Because
machine.
it looks, it's somewhat close to the joint axis. So I was saying, were you just doing that instead of drawing the line up like you made on the
No,
left?
next
Never
week,
mind. Never mind.
in a week or two, when we get through the strength profile stuff, we're going to redo this and add the body perspective.
Okay.
I'm going to clear up the definition of weight because now I think I might be making a small mistake. I want to be clear, but
I can go.
what I would say though is that, Darren, I wouldn't say load, but I would say that the weight is constant, but the resistance is changing.
Okay, yeah.
The weight is the same here, but yeah, based off of the mass and the shape of it.
It's the influence of the force of gravity on mass, is it not? Weight?
I think that's one of the reasons
Plus
why
acceleration.
that's one of the reasons why I was saying the mass times acceleration thing, because it still is force to a
mass
lot.
is the amount of matter in the object, whereas weight is force exerted on the object by gravity.
Yeah. So that's where, it is technically mass times acceleration, and force, technically the actual real equation for force is not mass times acceleration, the real equation for it, but weight, we're talking about how much mass there is based off of the influence of the acceleration to the ground. So technically, there are ways to talk about this, that the weight could be different technically,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about that, especially in this exercise, because that's going to come up based off the direction and the acceleration. To make it simple for right now, I would say that we're going to call the weight constant. Like this is 5 pounds, just to make it simpler, because we're not going to make this, I want this to be more about just getting some ideas of the momentum, kinetic energy, direction stuff, and not into all that. But we can learn all that stuff. I'll be honest, I'm comfortable with it, but I'm not a superstar at it like Greg Mack is. So I'll try to get as much info as I can so we can add more to this for sure. Yes. So to Darian, I wouldn't say load, because in engineering terms, load means something a little bit different, but we do have the same weight, but the resistance can change.
Sure.
And so that's what we're kind of seeing here, right? Is that's what torque is, right? If we look at torque equals force times moment arm, right? Line of force times distance, or weight times moment arm, if we want to say that right now. That's what I'm trying to say, is that 10 pounds, 10 pounds. This 10 pounds over here is going to be heavier than the 10 pounds on this side.
Is that because there's more torque?
Yes, but because there's more distance.
Yeah.
There is more torque, but the torque change has nothing to do with this right now.
Yeah, it's just because of the distance.
It has to do with the
Yeah,
distance.
yeah.
So yes, yes. Okay, cool. Now I want to add another little variable here, because when we start talking about muscular participation, we got some interesting thing that starts to happen when we are getting ready to talk about that, because you'll notice that, I'm going to draw another line up here, yellow, almost set, right? And pardon me if this is not 100% straight. We got this joint axis right here. And we're gonna kind of sectionalize it. So we got the resistance on one side and the resistance on the other. This here, based off of the angle of the lever, which direction because of the lever is the resistance going to travel. It's trying to travel down. But which way is it going to end up traveling because of where the joint axis is? Is it going to travel this way or this way? Is it trying to come back to the underneath the axis? All of this, pardon me?
Would you say backwards or to the right?
I wouldn't say backwards necessarily, this thing, but you could say to the right in this context, is that this system is trying to achieve homeostasis. It wants to not work very hard, but it's in front of this line. So if this machine, there was no person in here and we just let it go, since there's no actuators holding it still, it wants to come right and hang right in this yellow line. Just like you guys do, if I put a big weight in your arm and I say, hold this out here or hold this out here, you're not gonna keep it like that for too long because fatigue will happen and all that stuff, but where it's the least amount of energy is when it's just hanging at your side. Right? So in this scenario, we've got this machine, it's trying to travel in this position this way, which is still perpendicular to this lever system. So it's trying to move 90-degree angle to the direction to this lever. In this scenario, assuming my lines are okay, this is trying to travel this direction. Does that make sense? So again, forgetting the human, forgetting the exercise, if we just picked that system up,
Because it wants to
Wouldn't it
just
be
hang straight.
Kind of this way, no?
in that, it would be, and it will be. So in this position, it's trying to go straight down. I'm gonna see if I can do this without work, please, technology. Nope. Serious hard no. That was a bad one. Once the system gets to here, then Anna, yeah, then you're correct. Because what's going to happen is, and that's the whole thing with that tangent conversation, is as the lever moves, it's always moving 90 degrees to the direction of that metal bar.
Makes sense.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So what I'm talking about is specifically in this position,
Oh,
the line of force
interesting.
is parallel to which, to the direction of the lever system. Now that changes if we go back to that example we were just talking about now, right? If I get to, I'm 99% sure, if I'm here, the lever is trying to tangentially move to this bar. So it's trying to go this direction.
Yeah.
However, we'll go blue again, right? We talked about if the weight were just gonna fall off, which way is it gonna go? It wants to go
Down.
this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this is where this 90-degree angle thing with moment arms and talking about tangents is really important. Is if we had this position here versus this position here, the weight is going to gain the most amount of acceleration for two reasons. One, the distance from the joint. Two, the direction the weight wants to travel and the input arm wants to travel are the same. So what that means is that the mass is not battling the tangent of the input arm too much. When we get here, even if we assumed the moment arm was the same length, we've got something funky starting to happen where the weight's trying to travel down to the ground and the bar is trying to travel inward. So this is when we get into something that we'll be talking about soon that I mentioned before called component forces, because what's happening here is this mass actually kind of has two directions. It has the direction it's traveling with the bar, and we have the direction of it trying to go down to the ground. And the summation of those two directions is what's actually influencing what's happening at this bar and a couple other things that we're going to get into in a minute. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So coming back to this, I mean, even I'm gonna erase those lines when you guys are done, just to kind of clean this photo up a little bit.
They'll
It's
be
hard
in the
to
video.
Draw
yes.
this whole.
I'm recording this video. Yeah. I'm 99% sure I'm recording this video. I'm recording this video. Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll probably be tomorrow because I got a crazy stupid day, but I'll put this on the YouTube thing and put it on the Teams thing so you guys can review this. So this 90-degree angle here, the direction that the lever is traveling, is called the tangent. A bar, a system moving in a rotary environment, the direction of the lever will always be tangential to the lever. However, that does not change the influence of which direction the weight / mass is trying to go. So same thing here is if we go down to this yellow line here that I drew as kind of like a center line to try and show plumb. I'm going to erase these here just to make it a little easier for where we're going next. Okay. If we come back to this yellow line here, if the bar were going to travel this way, if the input arm were going to try and travel this way back to this position, the tangential line would be this direction. The mass is trying to go this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Now, what's interesting about this is that we don't really have a moment arm here. We've got 0 moment. If I took that same line, I should undo, amazing. From the joint axis, if I go down to the line of force hanging down here, there is no distance from the moment arm in this position. Which means that if you were gonna try to move this thing, if it weighed 1 pound or 500 pounds, since there's no distance, I guarantee any one of us with one finger could budget and make it move a little bit, which is getting into that resistance profile thing. That was awesome. I don't know how we got on that tangent conversation-wise, but I like what you guys were asking. That was awesome.
That was funny.
Cool.
And the pin or the axis is almost frictionless too. Right? So that's another thing with those machines is that pendulum.
Yeah.
It can just swing.
Yeah.
So the whole other
Well,
So pretty much you move it just by a little bit and then you just add a swing and you go up all the way.
yeah,
Like if you try to go straight up, it's like almost painful.
just to go slow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried. Greg Max actually got one because he used to actually train at Westside Barbell. Long story, which is a really funny story. He's got one, and I tried it, and I tried to go slow and then fast, and I can see why everyone likes to go fast on it because it does feel good. It feels good once you get going. It's just there are some elements of potential risk.
I loaded it. I'm gonna do it. I loaded it. I was like, okay. I'm like embarrassed unloading
You
the
potentiated your hamstrings.
machine. Well, I
So-
tried to go slow to engage the muscles better instead of just swinging it and wrecking my back.
I wish one day if we have enough space, I will have one of these machines because I think there's a lot of really great lessons that you can learn on it, and I think it's great for clients in some ways. I would love to get that one we just saw if we get more space. So here's what I just want you guys thinking about, because now what we're going to start talking about is we're going to start talking about direction of force. Direction, and because the direction is going to start to influence at one point which muscles are involved in a really, really big way. So right here, this bar, this line is just giving us a centerfold as to where the weight wants to go back to. So here, the resistance is trying to travel to the right. And here, this is technically trying to travel down and to the left. Okay, cool. So we're gonna come back to this. I might be the glass guys. If you don't, do you mind checking really quick?
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Oh,
Maybe not. Okay, so talking about direction.
sounded like a client going that way.
If we were going to add a person in here with the direction, and again, very clearly, we're not thinking about how the muscles are, distance from the muscles, anything like that. Right here, if we've got this input arm trying to travel this way, we have this individual here with their legs where they are. Which side of the joint axis of their hip is going to be worked? Is it going to be the front of the thigh or the back of the thigh in this position?
In this position?
In this position, yeah,
The front one.
it's going to be the front. So again, I was saying just again, for now, statics, if we've got a joint axis, that is huge. But if we've got a joint axis here, and they've got their lever arm of their appendage that we'll call just to here for right now to make it very simple. If you're an engineering person, you know these are all inaccurately drawn, but it's just to get you thinking about it. Everybody thinking about it, right? If this is trying to travel this direction, this weight here is going to be trying to push on the front through this pad here. So what that means is that everything from this input point right here where the hip touches that system and where this pad touches the front of the ankle everything on the front side of this joint system that has an opportunity to contract will work. Now, for some people, when I've taught these classes, this is kind of like a harder thing to see in this position. Does this make sense to you guys? Cool. When we get to here, I mean, this machine is pretty infamous for it's what it does. Like what people, ooh, this is amazing. I'm loving it. I'm loving this, right? So same thing now is that if we've got this weight going back down, this pad, the top pad, is going to be the thing that's going to push down on this, and it's trying to go down to the ground. It's pulling all the torque here. It's going to come through this pad here, and that means everything on the top side of this joint axis is going to work.
Yeah.
Low back, glutes, hamstrings, knee flexors, all that kind of stuff. Okay, awesome. This is very interesting to me because if you were to perform this statically, this is both going through the full range of motion that Coop was doing in the video we just observed. He's using, technically, if you're going slow enough, you're going to be using both hip flexors, knee extensors, as well as hip extensors, isometric knee flexors, and all that kind of stuff. How do people use this thing though? There's a lot more speed that's involved. What's very interesting is as we start adding an element of speed, I'm going to switch this off for a second. Don't mess up. Please don't lose all those lines. Okay. When we start adding an element of speed, the direction of the resistance starts to change. Now, what I'm going to do to make this extremely simple to get started is we're going to talk about the extremes of static, like we just talked about. And then what I'm writing down here is west side dynamic, because most of the folks that I've seen do the west side version are doing it very, very quickly. So in this position, I kind of got this reverse. If I use the red to talk about the static influence we saw that the resistance, why do I still have this nubby marker? The resistance is trying to go down towards the ground because the weight is just trying to fall. Same here, the weight's trying to go down towards the ground and it's going down towards the ground. And using that same drawing we just saw with the lady on the older Rogue model, we saw that this position here is involving the front of the thigh. This position here, if it's just hanging there, it's not going to really engaging too much. And then this one here is going to be the back of the leg.
Yeah.
If you guys were swinging, you guys ever play with yo-yos?
Yes.
I used to love yo-yos. I remember I was in a movie theater and I was trying to do like the around the world and it broke and it flew across the old Cineplex theater. It was really bad. I was like really young and really reckless. Talk about yo-yos, right? As we start to get this thing going, right? People are they start down here. They're trying to get some momentum to get this thing started. So what they're doing is they're trying to get that motion kind of front to back going. Get a little bit of assistance.
Like a swing.
It's exactly like a swing, exactly like a swing. It's the exact same mechanics. Once you start getting some of that momentum, some of that kinetic energy that's transferring back and forth, you can actually make the weight of the person on the swing or the weight on the weight stack do the work for you. Theoretically, when you get really, really skilled at this, you're only going to be contracting if you're doing it just to move it. Even the way you were doing it, describing it, that sounds totally different, which is great. Like trying to squeeze at certain points. In my experience, the people I've talked to who try to use this, they're doing like a lot of reps. And I don't believe they're squeezing as much, but they're squeezing in some positions because you have to maintain that kinetic energy. You got to maintain it. You got to at least, just like a swing, you got to at least swing your legs just a little bit to keep that thing going. So what happens is they start getting this thing going front to back and front to back. And at a certain point, the weight picks up enough acceleration in this point that it can actually get back up to this point here. And this is where the individual, when they're doing it, is really not doing that much work.
Now, would it also change the line of force for gravity and overcome gravity if you get enough momentum and therefore your force lines change?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you guys want to experience this, you're 100% correct. It does start to supersede gravity.
Yeah.
And this is the funny thing is that, oh, I should turn this off for a second.
Wouldn't that mean it will turn into a cardio exercise instead of actual muscle exercise? Like
100%.
Like kettlebell swings.
I think that's what starts to happen is that you are getting, I think that's a great way of looking at it, is that you're moving away. For me, a resistance exercise, well, it's all resistance exercise, but something that's kind of more weight or resistance focused to me takes someone a little bit closer to muscular fatigue or strength fatigue or something like that. to Anna's point, I mean, I think most of us could probably go on that thing and go for a minute straight. Not really feel too much muscle soreness, maybe a little, but be more anaerobically tired. So to Liz's point, this thing does start to supersede resistance and gravity. And this is the same thing we were talking about with the lateral raises, is that, I'll use a bicep curl for example. If I'm doing a bicep curl and I'm going slow, the resistance is constantly trying to go down towards the ground. So in this position, try to go straight down towards the ground. As I try to go straight down towards the ground. As I come up to this position, it's further away from my elbow. When I come up to here, it gets really, really close to me and the resistance gets less. Now, when you see people and they do this kind of thing, if they do that slow enough, fast enough rather, the direction of resistance at the starting point actually ends up being, behind them a bit more. Can't even see it on the camera. Does that make sense to you guys though? That the resistance is actually trying to push back that way. So there's a point where they have the dumbbell behind them. They use the same thing. They get a little bit of swinging, a little bit of inertia or momentum, and then they catch the resistance, but the resistance is actually traveling back that way. And then it actually gets really, really light. And this is where I will set up the fish scales next time. We can talk a little bit about inertia. You're only getting resistance in specific ranges. If you guys want a really great example of this, go onto one of the scales we've got anywhere in the gym and do some squats. Put your feet on 2 different scales. Watch the scales. Don't worry about your technique. Go really, really slow down and then come back up. And if you go slow enough, your weight, if you weigh X, should be relatively constant. If you do it at a faster tempo,
It's going to be all over the place.
you'll notice that if you weigh 200 pounds, that it goes 200, 0, 350, back up 0, 200. And it's this kind of fluctuating, this undulating force that's getting kind of put on top of you.
You kind of get the same result when you do the hack squat with the air machines.
And how so? Doesn't it?
Because it's compressing, and then you see the arrows just like changing the resistance when you go.
Yeah, the air machines. The air machines are a little bit different because there's not as you get some of it.
Yeah, I know because it's of the air compression. You're like squeezing it more and squeezing it less, but I mean the idea kind of.
You can see the shifts, which is really, really cool. Which I think is really awesome. Actually, you know what would be a great exercise is we can take hook up a dynamometer onto one of those things. We haven't even done this. That'd be great. And see, are the changes on the analog scale close to that with the dynamometer? But yeah, it's the same kind of, you can see the same kind of shift, which I think is really cool. Let me go back to that picture here, the video, sorry. So rewatching this now,
Then put my other
how much weight is going to work from here?
foot in, and then I'm able to go. So just to show you kind of how it rocks.
How much weight is he experiencing in that position? Do you think? How much of, because that weight he's got, I think he took, he's on his way up. Let's just try and get it right there, right? He gets up to that top point, right? You guys have, I mean, I've seen everybody in here exercise. You guys all know what an end range feels like when you're changing directions, what that feels like, right? If you do a lateral raise and you do this versus this, how much, so this is what he's doing, which I think is really interesting, is that to Anna's point prior, there's not a lot of challenge at specific points. And in fact, I think where he's getting most of the work is that very bottom position.
As you can see,
There, where he's getting pulled all the way forward. His glutes, his hamstrings, and his low back, based off of the position he's in, are as lengthened as they can possibly get. I think he's catching the weight. His muscles are at the lengthened end. They're kind of that active insufficiency lengthened end we talked about. They're catching the weight. He stops just enough. Because in this position, like we talked about in the prior, oh my God, I love all these annotation features. This is great.
How to make Brandon happy, dots and arrows.
Seriously? Seriously. I was literally like, how could I do this on Microsoft Teams? And now I'm seeing this. I'm like, oh, this is great, right? In this position, the weight's trying to travel this direction until it's not.
Yeah.
And then what happens is he's got an advantage, right? He's relying on the lengthened passive end of his tissue to break it. right? So he's not working super hard, but his muscles are taking a lot of force. And which direction is this weight trying to go back down again?
Towards him.
So he's got acceleration. He's generating acceleration back to this position in two ways. He's got muscles in a lengthened position. So he's using the plastic end of those muscles, potentially, right? Active insufficiency has that lengthened. The muscles can't lengthen anymore based off of some of the soft tissues and the muscles. They can't stretch anymore. So they're like sturdy ropes. They catch it. And that's going to actually help to generate force back the other way. He also has the weight trying to go back until it meets this point here where the joint axis is. What are you going to say, Chris?
Is there a stop on it?
There is, but he's not getting to it.
Okay.
Yeah, because it could get up to.
So technically, the weight is forcing him to lengthen the muscle. So it's kind of at that point when he's swinging, the weight is doing the work for him instead of the muscles actively lengthening and shortening.
100%. Because what we just saw in that last photo is if he was doing it via muscles, the glutes would not be working in this position. The resistance, like we still drew here, oops. The resistance is, if it were in a controlled scenario, it's trying to go back this way.
Okay.
Which means that moment arm, it would be all the muscles on the front side of the axis that'd be working if he were going slow enough, which I think would be a really cool exercise. Because one thing I always struggle with clients is, okay, can I stimulate the backside and the front side? I end up using two different exercises, the Nautilus hip extension or the Kaiser hip. We're going back and forth. This could be really cool where you get to work the shortened end of both ranges.
Another question, would, like in a scenario where you are actually using the momentum, wouldn't that mean that he's using the slow twitch muscle more than fast twitch?
That's a harder one to say for sure. Yeah, no, I don't know.
Because you can go for longer on that until your muscles fatigue.
I can't comment on that with a good answer. I don't know if it's one fiber type over the other, because I don't think it's that he's just using overall a lot of muscles. I don't think, but either fast twitch or slow twitch. I don't know. That's a great question though. I don't think so, but I don't know. So you guys can already start to see what we're talking about with the momentum side of it though. That right here, if we've got that distance back to where the weight wants to be, he gets all of this assistance to squeeze and bring this thing all the way back up. And that's really interesting to me because no wonder people can keep going. No wonder people can keep the momentum up. I think this is a very interesting in this scenario.
But that would be the reason why they also can keep going, because their muscles don't fatigue, and that means that it's slow.
Or they're not engaging the tissues. I could be both.
But then what's the point of the exercise?
So I was just.
To be honest,
Moving the legs.
to be honest, the way that he's doing
Then it's
it
just
right
the
now.
cardio.
Exactly. To be honest, that's kind of my point in the way he's doing it right now. I don't think it's a bad exercise at all. I do think though, and this is kind of just based off how I'm thinking about things as mechanically as I can. Is this going to work for me now that I've messed this up? These lines are probably going to stay up here.
Because I've done that on a bench
Put in
with legs, but then
and
you
unable
have
to
to wait
go.
for the
So
legs.
just to show you kind of how
Yeah.
it rocks.
This is the thing about using inertia and momentum to help you with exercise is that if it's your initial go-to, you're not really using a lot of muscles. If you grab a big weight and you fling it around and you hit and you can't move it anymore, but you're not out of breath, you can't feel your muscles. There's a lot of things that you should be able to feel, so to speak. To your point, I don't think he's working hard because he's talking to the camera, right? He's ripping. Now, what I think would be really, really cool is if he slowed down 50%.
Yeah, no.
Not all completely, like not like super slow. Like, did you try it super slow when you were, is that what you were? Yeah. That would be insanely hard.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be a really cool exercise for someone who can do that, but I don't even know if you'd need weight on
But
it.
in my head, because I was focusing on the muscle building, not cardio.
Mhm.
That's why I wanted to kind of slow and focused kind of movement, and then that's why I got embarrassed and started unloading the machine.
Now, what I think would be awesome if I had if we got one of these machines, what I would absolutely do, not on the machine, is I would, and I'll tell you exactly why. Hopefully this gives a little bit more framing from what we talked about last week, is that the resistance in this scenario, trying to go down towards the ground, right? So when we're talking about contracting, that's the reason why it's so hard, is that he has this huge distance, huge distance from his joint axis to his ankle. So if his muscles are in a shortened position, force production is pretty low, he's got the greatest distance possible here. So this is part of the reason why I think learning more about resistance profiles helps a ton, because what would be great, if we ever get one of these things, as I mentioned, we'll do this. I'm gonna put some anchors up here, and instead of hooking resistance weights on here, how great would it be if we could hook resistance bands?
That's what I was saying about the cables.
Oh, okay, I see now.
So you can use a cable machine and a high enough box that your legs can hang from, and attach the cables to your legs and do similar, but you're not going to be using as much momentum because it's a cable and not the free weight.
Would you be able to make a video about that?
Sure.
Yes, awesome. I mean, and this is,
I would have to do it in LA Fitness though, because they have the high enough boxes and they have
that'd be fun.
cables.
Let's do it. We'll make it. We'll do. Let's make it. That'd be kind of fun. See what they say. But I think this is where it'd be really cool with cables or elastic bands if we could organize this like this, because you get the support and you get a slight bit of drop off and a lot more torque down at the bottom here. So cable machines would definitely be, I think,
We don't have boxes here, right?
right now,
No.
but we do need some. Anyway, how'd you guys find this today? Was this kind of an interesting exploration of kind
Oh,
of,
for sure.
cool. To be honest with you guys, I actually would love one of these machines, because I think the support scenarios it creates and the opportunity for a really unique exercise, even doing it unilaterally without the pad, would be really, really helpful. But I would say if you guys want to learn, you guys want to watch some really interesting stuff,
Yeah.
Garage Gym Reviews has got some really, really cool exercise equipment. He is very, very CrossFit centric. He calls himself a power lifter, but everything he does is much more momentum based than control based. But regardless, and that's fine. But he's got some really cool exercise tools. If you're looking for creative things for here, at home, whatever you like. Am I sitting on my face?
No.
Oh, good.
It's just
Oh.
stitching from my mask.
Cool. So what we're going to do next week, we're going to start adding this strength profile stuff into the equation. We're going to talk about length tension relationship, active and passive insufficiency. We talked about some of it during COVID. I'm going to try and be a little more specific, just talking about muscles. And then the following week or the end of next week, we're going to review, not this video, but we'll go back to the picture of the two people on the Rogue machine and start stacking some muscles on it and talk about one of the reasons why when you're going slow, it's so hard, but then also one of the reasons why people have a tendency to use momentum, and joint structure wise, if there was a risk on joint structures, what would that risk be and how can we mitigate that response? Cool. That was fun. And I'll get a little more information on the weight stuff. I want to be a little more accurate with that to make sure I've got the right jargon when we're talking about that from a physics perspective and load. Do you guys have any questions at all?
I wouldn't say question, but this reminds me of the lying leg curls so much, because one thing I've always noticed is like, and even like back at Good Life, like I probably like a couple months ago, like when I would train clients on it, like I remember I always had this one client that he always lying leg curled so much weight, and like I just could never understand like how he could do it. But now that like I've understood the machine more, and now even when I do it, like I struggle like at the very top, like if you do it slow and controlled with like 40 pounds. But if you do something like this where you're just like swinging it at the top, when you have like, even though the weight itself could be like 200 pounds, but like at the very top you feel nothing. So that's how like I was looking at it in comparison to this, and like slowing it down makes it like 20 million times harder.
Oh, yeah.
It absolutely does.
You want to make it even harder? Unflex your ankles.
And to be honest,
The leg curl machine, laying down leg curl machine, if you unflex your ankles, you're gonna die.
Oh,
and so
I've never tried, I don't think.
this is part of the reason why all the machines that we have here, I mean, we really have no machines that LA Fitness
From your
has.
calf and put it
Because
in
all the
your
machines that,
hamstring.
not all, a lot of the machines that LA has, like the Matrix one and the Life Fitness one, if you look at that cam thing that I've talked to you guys about, and we're going to do much more of, the profiles they have as it relates to the strength profile really doesn't match up. So the tendency for people to get over that really, really hard part where they're weak is to fling it.
Yeah.
Because they're not using a lot of muscle energy. And this is where, I mean, you can watch, next time you're at any gym, anywhere else but here, I shouldn't say that, even here sometimes, you'll see people on machines and they'll fling, they'll do 15 reps and they sit there and they're just relaxed. And you know they didn't do a lot of work. They were just contracting in a small range, just enough to get through the motions. But that's the thing, is that's where you can't equate the motions versus the muscular
Like in
participation.
the training, like my own with my clients, I only allow the sort of swinging just if you're going to a full fatigue.
Oh, yeah.
So you do the proper, and then you literally finish off with some like.
Cheek curls.
I do with lateral raises all the time. I think using it strategically
Yeah.
is brilliant.
Oh, for sure. Even like if any of you know Fuad.
What, Abidad?
Yes.
Abiyad, yeah.
Yeah, and he at some point I've obviously like he posted like biceps curls, and he was swinging.
Bye, everybody.
And somebody was like obviously commenting on that, and what he said is like, you can only comment on my technique if you have arms bigger than mine.